Invitation and the question. Above the blue curve of Earth, a silver ship appeared, silent and bright like a second moon hanging in daylight. It moved with calm precision, and every satellite camera turned to it before governments could even prepare. A signal the ship spoke in every language at once, its voice neither male nor female, saying, "We come to protect you, humanity. You are under our shield now, do not fear." This is a gesture of friendship. People everywhere froze. Screens flickered in schools, streets, markets, homes, everyone watching the same silver shape against the clouds. Some cheered, some cried, some prayed. Some asked what danger we faced. But most of all, there was confusion. Because protection meant something was wrong in a command center buried deep under mountain rock. Commander Elias Ward watched the transmission without blinking. He was a soldier who had fought only human wars. Yet in his bones he felt something off. Beside him stood Dr. Lyra Solon, a scientist from the Orbital Institute with sharp eyes that never missed details. She leaned forward, replaying the message frame by frame. The words were perfect, the tones calm, but her mind caught the absence of something they say. Protect, she murmured, but not from. What? Down on the streets of New York and Karachi and Sao Paulo, the air filled with argument. Some people painted alien symbols on walls declaring the dawn of peace. Others warned it was a trap. Rumors exploded across the net about secret deals and hidden pacts. Late that night, a short video went viral, showing a small child standing before a screen asking in a trembling voice, "Protect us from who?" And that simple question lit the fuse of doubt around the world. Days passed, the silver ship unfolded, like a blooming flower above orbit, releasing thin, shimmering drones that formed a bright ring around Earth. Broadcasting signals of reassurance, the aliens who called themselves the Velari claimed they had come after observing countless young species destroyed by cosmic forces. They spoke of meteoroids and space raiders and unstable suns. Their story was elegant and comforting, but Elias Ward could not shake a feeling that every kindness carried a weight. He met with leaders through secure channels, some eager to sign accords for access to advanced shields, others demanding to see proof of danger. When Lyra spoke before the council, she pointed out a subtle timing gap in the first transmission, a fraction of a second delay consistent with pre-recorded speech, not live dialogue. "It means we might be talking to an echo," she said, "not to the true Velari." Meanwhile, a pilot named Dax Hunter, one of the best in Earth's defense fleet, watched the silver ring from his fighter on patrol duty. The sight was beautiful, like a halo around the planet. But when his radar scanned the structure, he noticed faint interference patterns. Not random noise, but coded sequences, almost like a heartbeat. He sent the data to Lyra, and she stayed awake 3 nights straight trying to decode it. When she finally played the filtered sound, it was not a machine pulse but a whisper, repeating coordinates that pointed to a region of deep space where no star was catalogued. The message ended with a phrase, translated roughly as "the cradle must not wake." Elias received reports of strange effects near the Velari drones. Some communication arrays flickered, some satellites shut down automatically. The aliens called it harmless calibration, yet technicians found their memory wiped clean every time they connected to the alien network. The commander ordered a halt to further links, but half the world was already dependent on the new shield frequencies, which blocked meteor fragments and even neutralized small space debris. There was no clear line between safety and surrender. At a global summit, the Velari envoy finally appeared in person, or at least through a projection. It was tall, slender, with skin that shimmered like liquid glass and eyes too. Calm to read it, repeated its offer. "Earth is safe under our guidance. You will remain free to grow. But we must oversee your orbital and energy operations for your own security." The hall filled with applause and fear mixed together. Then a reporter shouted the question that had echoed online, "From who are you protecting us?" And for the first time, the envoy paused. Its lips moved, but no sound came. The silence spread like a wave across the room, and then it simply said, "The ones who will return." That answer chilled everyone yet before more could be asked. The projection faded and the ship above Earth dimmed its lights for the first time since arrival that night. Cities looked up at a sky that felt heavier. Elias met with Lyra and Dax in a dim command room screen showing scattered static signals. Lyra said the phrase "the ones who will return" might mean another alien race or something deeper. Maybe the Valari were not saviors, but survivors of something worse. Dax leaned back staring at the map of the stars and said, "Maybe they are running and hiding behind us." Elias stood silent, thinking of the child's question. Protect us from who? He felt the weight of leadership pressing against his chest. Outside the window, dawn rose across, the mountains painting the sky red, gold, and violet. He realized humanity stood at the edge of a choice to accept comfort or demand truth, as the first sunlight touched the silver ring above the planet. The commander whispered a promise to himself. "They may come to protect us, but before I let them, I will find out from who." And somewhere beyond the dark edge of the system, a faint echo answered the same question in a different tongue, repeating it like a prophecy. From who, from who, from who? Contracts and cost. The silver ship still hung above the clouds, unmoving like a patient god, and its shimmering ring hummed faintly across the night sky, while on Earth governments met in sleepless sessions to decide whether to sign the Pact of Protection. The Valari offered the people wanted peace, the soldiers wanted control, and the scientists wanted answers. Commander Elias Ward sat in a dark room full of flickering screens, each one showing a different city where protests burned bright, some shouting for unity with the aliens, others demanding independence. His hand rested on a folder labeled Valari Treaty Draft. Yet he could not bring himself to open it, because every page felt like a chain doctor. Lyra Solon stood beside him, eyes red from days. Without rest, she had been listening to the hum of the ring and decoding fragments of alien data that slipped between frequencies. She told Elias that the ring was transmitting patterns identical to those used in their biological archives, which meant that the so-called shield might be scanning the planet, not protecting it. Elias frowned and asked why the Valari would need to scan every living thing. She said softly, "Maybe they are searching for something." Meanwhile, Dax Hunter was assigned to escort duty, flying near the ring to monitor drone activity from his cockpit. He could see the bright curve of Earth below, a living jewel of blue and green, while alien drones glided like silver birds across the void. He spoke to his ground control, joking to calm his nerves, but his laughter sounded hollow in the static. Then a new voice broke through the channel, a soft whisper in no known language, repeating coordinates, the same strange message Lyra had once decoded. Dax recorded it and sent it back to base before his signal was jammed by a pulse that shut down half his systems, forcing him to glide home using manual thrusters. Down on Earth, the world split into two camps: the Pact nations, who signed under the Valari Promise, and the free states who refused to yield control. The Pact nations received fragments of alien technology, energy shields, and medicines that cured diseases in hours, but every piece came with encrypted locks that prevented humans from studying the core. Lyra and her team at the Institute begged for permission to dissect one of the devices, but officials denied it, claiming the Valari forbade tampering. It was the price of continued protection. In the Free States, people turned to old ingenuity, recycling satellites and using analog systems to stay independent. They joked that maybe going backward was the new way forward. Elias traveled secretly between both factions, trying to keep humanity united. But the distrust grew faster than he could bridge it. At one council meeting, an argument erupted between generals until one slammed his fist on the table, shouting, "We are not children who need aliens to hold our hands." Elias replied quietly, "Then stop acting like children and start thinking like humans." That night, Lyra approached Elias with evidence she had found inside the Valari archives. Her hands shook as she placed a small drive on his desk. She had discovered data logs from dozens of planets, all marked as protected worlds. Every one of them showed a pattern. First came the promise, then the shield, then silence. The transmissions ended the same way, a single line reading stability, achieved population index 0. She said, "It means they were wiped out after protection." Elias stared at the words, feeling the blood drain from his face. He asked if she was certain, and she nodded. "I wish I wasn't." While they spoke, Dax received new orders to test the defensive grid along the ring. He flew his fighter into the outer field, accompanied by 2 unmanned drones. The readings at first were stable. Then a ripple spread across the ring like a heartbeat, and his controls flickered. He saw shapes moving inside the field, shadows like giant creatures made of light swimming behind the veil. Before he could react, one of the drones vanished without explosion, just gone. Erased from existence, the second sent a burst of static before disintegrating into dust. Dax barely escaped, his hull scorched and his ship trembling with residual. "Charge," he shouted into comms that something was alive in the ring. The Velari envoy appeared hours later, projected into the global network. Its calm voice explained the event as a simple malfunction, claiming that energy resonance sometimes erased objects temporarily. The council accepted the excuse, eager for calm, but Dax swore it was a lie. Elias believed him and ordered Lyra to dig deeper. She broke through another layer of the archive only to find a locked partition labeled Cradle, and inside encrypted images of vast cocoons orbiting dead worlds. Then something unexpected happened. The Velari requested that human governments send selected officers and scientists to board their orbital archive for a demonstration. They said it would prove the benevolence of their intentions and perhaps soothe mistrust. The packed nations agreed immediately, sending delegates and engineers while Elias and Lyra watched helplessly. The shuttle carrying the first group ascended through the clouds. Dax was among them as pilot, his voice calm as he said over the radio, "I'll see what's behind there, smile, Commander." Hours later, the live feed from the shuttle went dark without warning, no explosion, no distress signal, just a blank screen. The Velari claimed that the demonstration was postponed due to radiation surge and that the shuttle had been safely redirected, but tracking stations found nothing, no wreckage, no beacon, only a faint echo repeating from the same deep space coordinates as before. The cradle must not wake. The world mourned the missing crew and rumors ignited once again. Crowds filled the streets demanding answers, some calling Elias a hero for resisting the treaty, others accusing him of sabotaging peace. He stood before the cameras, silent as the lights blazed in his face. Then he spoke slowly, saying that humanity must never trade freedom for safety, because safety without truth is only a different kind of death. His words spread like fire across networks, stirring hope and fear alike. That night, Lyra sat alone, staring at the stars, thinking of Dax lost somewhere beyond the ring. She replayed his last message. The static breaking, but one sentence. "Clear, you were right, Lyra. It's not a shield, it's a cage." Her hands trembled as she whispered his name. The hum of the alien ring outside her window grew louder, almost like a heartbeat echoing across the night sky and far above the silver ship. Pulsed once with new light, as if listening to her grief. Humanity stood at the edge of its greatest decision, divided yet awakening. The question that had once been a child's innocent curiosity now became a prophecy. Protect us from who and in the silence of orbit. Something ancient stirred behind the veil, waiting for the answer. The first test. The sun rose over a divided earth, casting gold and crimson light over cities that no longer trusted the sky. The Velari ring shimmered like a vast crown of silver around the planet, its glow steady and indifferent, as though it had been there since the beginning of time, and would remain long after humanity was gone. Commander Elias Ward stood on the balcony of the mountain base, watching the strange beauty of it, feeling both awe and dread. He had seen soldiers break under lesser fears, but this was different. This was the fear of being cared for by something that did not love you. Dr. Lyra Solon joined him, holding a datapad. Her face pale from sleepless nights, she said the council finally agreed to a joint operation. They want to test the shield to prove its safety. They will send an asteroid toward Earth to see if the Velari defense truly works. Elias turned his head slowly, saying, "So we are going to throw a rock at our own home?" She nodded grimly, saying, "It is better than waiting to see what the Velari throw first." The world watched as the plan unfolded in every nation. Scientists and engineers worked together with alien advisors to set up the test. A small asteroid named Ceres 9 was chosen. Redirected by human thrusters to skim Earth's upper atmosphere, the Velari promised to activate their field to deflect it and show their goodwill. They said it was harmless, but Elias saw it as the perfect trap. If the shield worked, humanity would trust them completely. If it failed, the world would burn. Dax Hunter should have been here to fly the observation run, but his ship was still missing somewhere beyond the ring. His name became a whisper in the halls of the base, a reminder of the cost already paid. Lyra worked side by side with human and alien engineers, decoding the field harmonics and checking for inconsistencies. She noticed that the alien devices refused to reveal their power source when she tried to measure energy output. Her instruments returned blank readings as if the power came from nowhere, or from something that existed only when observed. She wrote in her notes that the technology behaved like it was alive. Elias told her to focus on keeping civilians safe, but deep down he felt she was right, because when machines act like living things, they often have living masters. On the day of the test, the world fell silent. Millions watched. The broadcast, the asteroid appeared as a glowing point moving across the darkness. Cameras followed it as it approached atmosphere speed, increasing heat blooming like sunrise across the horizon. The Valari ships in orbit began to hum their silver, hulls pulsing with blue light. The alien envoy appeared again, its calm voice speaking across every channel saying, "We protect as promised." And the ring flared brighter than the sun. At first it worked. The asteroid slowed, glowing fragments scattering harmlessly across the sky. People gasped in relief and shouted in joy, thinking the danger had passed, but then something went wrong. A surge of power erupted through human communication grids. Satellites blinked out of sync, electricity and entire continents flickered and died, and the shield, instead of dispersing the energy, concentrated it in one place, forming a blazing spear of plasma, descending toward the ocean where a research station stood. The commander's voice roared across comms, ordering an emergency override. Lyra and her team scrambled to redirect field vectors, but the alien consoles refused input, displaying symbols that translated roughly to correction, denied human interference. Restricted. Elias slammed his fist against the console, shouting to cut the power directly. They rerouted through old analog switches and forced the grid into manual mode. For the first time, humans took control of the alien field by sheer will and brute logic. Lyra discovered that by inverting the feedback frequency, they could dissipate the plasma before it hit the surface. She and the technicians raced against time, typing sequences by hand. Sparks flew from panels, alarms blared, and the air filled with the smell of burning circuits. In orbit, one of the human shuttles, manned by volunteers, positioned itself directly in the path of the energy beam to act as a conductor. Their voices came through calm and steady, saying, "Tell Earth, we will hold the line." Lyra's hands trembled as she finished the last command, and Elias pressed the override together. The entire field shimmered. The light turned from blue to white, then to a deep gold. Before shattering like glass across the heavens, the plasma dispersed into harmless auroras. Dancing across the polar skies, the world erupted in cheers, not knowing how close it had come to destruction. But the cost was heavy. The shuttle that had absorbed the beam disintegrated, its crew lost to the fire. Their final transmission, a few broken words before silence. Elias closed his eyes, hearing the echo of Dax Hunter's laughter in his memory. Lyra stood beside him, tears streaming as she whispered, "They died proving we could control it, but also proving we were never meant to." Elias said, softly, "Then we will take what they gave and make it ours." The Valari envoy appeared once more, its voice colder than before, saying, "Human interference has caused instability. Further testing is forbidden. Your actions risk your own extinction." Elias stepped forward, glaring at the projection, and said, "Our extinction will be our own choice, not yours." The envoy did not reply. It simply faded away, leaving the air colder than before. That night, Lyra decoded the telemetry from the asteroid's remains. Hidden within the data was a strange signal, not from the Valari, but from something else. It repeated coordinates deep in the outer system, the same that Dax had once heard the phrase embedded in static, "The cradle must not wake." She played it for Elias, and he listened in silence before saying, "Maybe this is what they are really protecting us from, not invaders, but something they fear even more." Lyra asked if they should investigate, and he said, "Not yet. Not until we build our own shield." Our way. In the following days, small pieces of alien technology malfunctioned across the globe, some melting into liquid metal, others turning to ash as though reacting to the human override. Scientists recorded that the hum of the ring had changed, no longer a steady rhythm, but a low, irregular beat like the pulse of a creature disturbed in its sleep. And in that shifting tone, Elias felt that something vast and ancient had noticed humanity's defiance. When morning came, he addressed the world through the network, saying, "The test is over. The shield failed because we trusted those who do not trust us from now on." Earth will stand by its own hands, its own minds, and its own courage. The crowd erupted in cheers while the sky above remained silent and still, yet behind that silence the ring shimmered faintly as if watching, learning, waiting, and somewhere far beyond the system a deep echo answered with a sound like laughter mixed with hunger. The question, protect us from who, still hung in every heart. But now another thought had begun to grow. Maybe it was not protection they offered. Maybe it was containment. And if that was true, then humanity had already stepped outside the cage, and nothing in the universe could put it back. Ember strategy. The world after the first test was not the same, and humanity could feel the change in the air as if the very sky had learned to breathe differently. The shimmering Velari ring still circled Earth, but its once perfect hum was now uneven, pulsing with a rhythm like a nervous heartbeat. Scientists said the frequency shift meant nothing, but everyone could sense that something beneath that silver shell had started to watch closer. The governments argued endlessly. The packed nations claimed that the human override had endangered everyone, while the free states declared that it had saved the planet. Commander Elias Ward stood at the center of this storm, exhausted yet unbroken, his eyes shadowed from long nights staring at screens. Filled with alien code and human politics, he had seen courage and fear in equal measure. And now he knew that only a united Earth could survive what was coming. Dr. Lyra Solon had become both famous and infamous for her role in seizing control of the alien shield. Some called her the mother of human defiance. Others whispered she had doomed them all. She ignored both praises and curses, locking herself in the Institute laboratory surrounded by fragments of Velari devices salvaged from the failed test. She had begun to notice that each fragment reacted differently when exposed to human bioelectric signals, as though it recognized the touch of human life. One night she placed her hand on a fragment that had once been part of the energy core and felt a faint pulse against her palm, not mechanical but living. She whispered softly to it, asking, "What are you?" But it answered only with a single spark that flickered like a heartbeat and faded away. In orbit, the Velari envoy ships remained silent for weeks. Then suddenly they announced that all human interference with shield systems was now restricted. They accused Earth of violating galactic peace laws, a phrase that made little sense, but carried enough threat to unsettle. The Council, the packed nations, quickly agreed to the restrictions while the free states refused. Elias saw that division was exactly what the Velari wanted. Unity would have made humanity dangerous. Fragmentation made it predictable. So he proposed a secret project to bring the brightest minds from both sides together in hidden bases under the name Ember Strategy. The goal was simple: to learn from the alien technology without their consent, to turn their own power into a weapon of independence. The project began in quiet desperation. Hidden factories under deserts and mountains turned to laboratories where engineers worked with scavenged alien fragments, trying to understand their patterns. Lyra became the heart of the effort, building a prototype generator that could mimic the energy field of the Velari ring, but tuned to human resonance. She called it the Ember Core, because it glowed like fire trapped inside glass. Dax Hunter's old recordings from his lost mission served as their guide, his voice static-filled but brave, reminding them that the shield was not a barrier. It was a mirror reflecting control back to its source. Elias traveled from site to site, watching workers and scientists pushing past exhaustion, their hands dirty with grease and alien dust. He felt a quiet pride growing in the species he had sworn to protect, people who argued yet worked together, who doubted yet still built the impossible. Children painted murals of ships rising from Earth, not to flee, but to fight. He remembered the viral clip of the child asking from who, and thought maybe that simple question had done more than any speech it had woken. The world months passed, and the Velari began to respond in strange ways. Their drones now patrolled closer to the surface, occasionally sending beams of light that scanned entire cities, while their envoy stopped appearing in broadcasts altogether. Yet, despite the pressure, humanity grew bolder. The Ember Core prototype reached its first ignition. Test Lyra stood before a crowd of scientists in the underground chamber, the core hovering inside a magnetic field like a small sun. She said, "Today we prove that their power is not divine. It is science, and science belongs to all who dare to understand it." The core flared to life, bathing the room in gold light. Machines hummed, air vibrated, and for one moment everyone felt warmth, that was both alien and human at once. But then alarm shrieked. The field destabilized, cracks spread across the containment. Chamber energy spilling like liquid fire. Lyra shouted for manual shutdown. Elias slammed the emergency release and the core dimmed, leaving the room in silence and the smell of ozone. When the smoke cleared, the walls were scorched, but no one was hurt. And in the center of the floor, the ember core still glowed faintly, steady this time, breathing slow as though it had learned restraint. Lyra stared at it, whispering it, adapted like it wanted to live. Elias said, "Then maybe it does. And maybe that is what they fear." Later that night, as storms rolled across the surface of Earth, strange lights appeared in the sky. The Velari ring pulsed in patterns matching the ember core's test frequency, as if answering back communication arrays detected. New signals not from Earth, not from the Velari, but from somewhere beyond the system. The same coordinates repeated over and over again. The cradle must not wake, the phrase echoed across languages and instruments until technicians begged to shut the channels down. But Elias ordered them to keep listening. He had a feeling that whatever the cradle was, it held the reason for all of this. The next morning, a city under the packed nations went dark. Every network line severed, every satellite link. Lost drones sent to investigate vanished one after another. When contact was finally re-established, the city was silent. Streets empty. Lights flickering, only one message left behind carved into the plaza. Stone, a pattern identical to the Velari, symbols that meant correction achieved. Lyra looked at the footage and said softly, "They are starting to clean up their mess and we are next. Unless we move." Elias gathered the leaders of the Ember Project and said, "The time for secrecy is over. We show the world what we built, we fight with truth." He transmitted the plans for the Ember Core to every nation, open and free. He said, "If they come, let them come to a united Earth with fire in its hands." The Velari responded instantly, their ring brightening until it blinded half the sky and their ships moving closer to orbit lines of light, descending like rain. Humanity had defied their gods, and the gods had noticed. Across the world, sirens wailed and people looked up at the glowing heavens. Lyra stood beside the Ember Core, her hand resting on the glass, feeling its steady pulse. She whispered, "Dax, we are ready." Elias watched the skies and said softly, to no one in particular, "We have built our ember, now we will see if it burns or saves us." The light from the core grew brighter, matching the rhythm of the alien ring, and somewhere in the void between stars, something vast stirred as if awakening from a long sleep. And for the first time, humanity stood not as children of Earth, but as keepers of their own fire, waiting for dawn or destruction, whichever came first. The turning forge, the morning after the skies burned with the Velari ring. Light humanity awoke to a silence deeper than fear. Satellites showed that half the orbital systems were jammed, entire sectors filled with static, while the other half carried strange patterns repeating endlessly across frequencies that no one could trace. Commander Elias Ward stood in the command bunker beneath the old Nevada mountains, staring at the live feed of the alien ring, which now looked alive, its surface rippling like molten metal. He knew that this was not just a threat. It was a response. The Velari were preparing for something larger, something that might end Earth, if left unanswered, and still he felt no despair, only a rising calm, because for the first time since the shield's arrival, humanity had something of its own. The Ember Core had lived. Dr. Lyra Soland had not slept since that night, her team working without rest around the glowing sphere that pulsed at the center of the forge facility. The core's energy had stabilized in a way that defied both physics and programming, as if it had rewritten its own code. She discovered that it emitted harmonic tones matching human neural frequencies when people approached it. Their heart rates synchronized subtly to its rhythm. Some felt a calm, others an awakening of sharp focus. Lyra realized that the Ember Core was not only power, it was connection and energy that responded to life itself. She believed it could be amplified to create a field strong enough to counter the Velari technology, not by brute force, but by resonance. Across Earth, people gathered around screens watching as news channels debated the meaning of the Velari silence. One side called for surrender, demanding that the aliens restore communication and order. The other called for defiance, believing the Ember Project to be humanity's chance to rise. The old divisions returned, but now there was something different. A sense of shared destiny that crept through even the arguments. Old miners sent messages offering to dig new tunnels for reactors. Fishermen spoke of building coastal forges powered by tide energy, and soldiers volunteered for experimental defense lines. No one called it war yet, but everyone felt it coming. Elias held a meeting with the commanders of the world's unified defense grid, the holographic table filled with faces from every continent and orbiting station. He spoke with quiet authority, saying the Ember Core gives us a signal. We can amplify into the upper atmosphere. If we project it through the remaining Velari nodes, we might be able to invert their field and reveal what they are hiding. Behind that ring, one general objected that doing so could trigger a full-scale planetary strike. But Elias answered calmly, they are already preparing for one, we just haven't seen it yet. The plan became known as the Turning Forge. Humanity would use the aliens' own architecture against them, transforming the Velari shield into a mirror not of control but of truth. Lyra's teams began aligning their work with orbital engineers, setting up resonance amplifiers at key magnetic poles. Thousands of drones carried crystalline conductors made from the Ember Core's pattern. Every nation contributed something. Ships carried supplies across oceans, and mountain convoys moved through. Snow and ash people worked like a single organism, breathing through the same determination. It was not patriotism anymore. It was survival tied with wonder that maybe, just maybe, they were on the edge of becoming something greater. During one long night of testing, Lyra noticed that the core had begun to emit faint images within its light patterns, ghostly shapes of human faces shifting too fast to recognize, as if memories themselves were trapped inside. She realized that the energy resonance was pulling not just from electricity but from human biofields across the planet, every mind linked faintly by the frequency of shared thought. She called Elias to the forged chamber and showed him the flickering forms. He stared at the glowing sphere and said, then the ember is humanity itself. Maybe we were never building a weapon, we were building a mirror to see who we are. Before dawn, the Velari spoke again for the first time in months. Their voice came through every transmission channel at once calm, resonant, and inhuman. They said, you were warned. The cradle must not wake, and yet you strike the veil we placed between you and it. Your resonance will undo the seal and the tide will rise. Elias replied through the open broadcast, if there is something beyond that veil, then it's time we saw it. The Velari paused before answering, you are children playing with the tools of the architects. Your defiance will end more than your world. And then the signal died, leaving a sky full of silence. The Turning Forge began 2 hours later. Power stations roared across continents. The resonance amplifiers charged with luminous arcs. The Ember Core glowed brighter than ever, humming in a tone that made the air vibrate around it. Satellites caught the first pulses as they struck the Velari ring, beams of golden light dancing across its surface. The ring began to twist, folding space around itself like a ribbon of glass, and then for the first time its inner side became visible, a vast emptiness filled with countless black structures like roots stretching into infinity, each root pulsing with dim light, and from within came a deep sound like thunder rolling through metal. Lyra whispered, it's not a shield, it's a cage. Elias replied then, the question is who or what are they caging? Suddenly, every Velari ship in orbit activated their engines, blue fire cutting across the heavens as they descended in formation, their weapons charging the earth. Defense networks scrambled. Interceptors, thousands of human-made drones rising into the upper atmosphere for the first time. Not running, but ready to fight. The ember resonance spread through the pilot systems, connecting them through shared neural feedback. They could feel each other's presence, sense each movement before it happened. Battles began in the thin edges of space, luminous trails crisscrossing the darkness like living veins. And through it all, the Ember Core pulsed, guiding them like a heartbeat. Elias coordinated from the command deck, shouting orders as his screen filled with combat feeds. Velari drones fired beams that sliced through clouds, yet human ships dodged with impossible precision. Guided by the resonance, Lyra monitored the forges, energy levels, the core's light growing unstable. She realized that it was drawing energy, not just from the power grid, but from the emotional intensity of those connected to it. Courage, fear, love, defiance, all merging into the same signal, she said. Quietly, it's alive with us, Elias answered, then we hold nothing back. When the final wave of energy surged from the forge, the Velari ring cracked open like glass. The hidden structures beyond it released a burst of light so immense that every shadow on Earth vanished for a heartbeat, and in that instant humanity saw something colossal rising beyond the stars. A presence older than the Velari, older than memory itself, something vast enough to make entire constellations seem small when it turned its gaze toward Earth, and the Velari ships broke formation, scattering like frightened birds. Lyra felt her knees weaken and whispered, "We woke." The cradle, Elias looked up at the screen and said, "Then let it see us, because we will not bow, we will stand. And if it judges us, then it will judge a species that dared to look back." The forge chamber glowed brighter still, the ember pulse resonating across every city, across every mind. Humanity united not by command but by shared defiance, the world trembling beneath an awakening that none could yet comprehend. And somewhere in the silence between the stars, something smiled, not with malice, but with recognition, as if greeting an equal. And the forge turned once more, preparing for the fire that was yet to come. The cradle awakens. The light that erupted from the broken Velari ring poured across the solar system like a tide made of fire and memory. The ships that orbited Earth were thrown off course, their metal hulls glowing red, with heat as if the heavens themselves had been turned inside out. Commander Elias Ward stood at the command deck, unable to speak, as the display filled with impossible readings. Gravitational waves flickered through dimensions. Magnetic storms rippled. Across the moon's surface, the ember core at the forge center pulsed faster, its rhythm merging with the heartbeat of every connected human, as though the world had begun to breathe through one lung. The air on the surface trembled. Animals fled. Mountains cracked, but amid that chaos there was a strange harmony. Every person felt it deep inside, a resonance that whispered, "Wake up, wake up, wake up." Dr. Lyra Solon was standing in the forge chamber surrounded by a storm of light. The ember sphere had grown immense, its surface covered in shifting patterns that resembled constellations, ancient symbols glowing then fading as new ones appeared. The air smelled like rain and ozone. Her instruments were useless. Every measurement broke. Scale she could only watch as the sphere released slow streams of gold that floated upward through the ceiling, without melting it, passing into the sky and beyond. She realized that the ember was communicating, not in language, but in feeling. Each pulse sent waves of courage, love, defiance, curiosity across the entire network, linking every mind from soldiers in orbit to children watching from rooftops. And when those thoughts aligned, they formed a single unified will, not controlled, but connected, as if humanity had remembered its forgotten voice. High above in the fractured ring, the Velari ships regrouped, their silver hulls scarred, their calm composure gone. They spoke in harsh tones that were almost fearful. One message reached Elias through the emergency comms: "They have seen us, the architects will return." "Your resonance has called them from the dark," he asked. "Who are they?" And the answer came. "They are the first, the ones who made us, the ones who will unmake you." The transmission ended, with a sound not quite a scream, not quite static. It was the sound of surrender and terror combined. Elias turned toward his team and said, "Whatever they are, we will face them on our feet, not on our knees." The forge roared with power as human fleets formed ranks around Earth decks. Hunter led the first line of interceptors, his eyes reflecting the glow of the core even through the vacuum of space. His voice came through comms, strong and calm, saying, "We fly for all of them, for everyone who ever dreamed beyond their cage." And his squadron echoed the words across channels until every pilot repeated them like a vow. Then the stars changed shape ahead of them, as if reality itself were bending. Something massive approached from beyond the black, a shape larger than moons of Vessel, or being that glowed with shifting colors like a storm of galaxies. Its presence bent light, time, and thought all at once when it spoke. It was not through sound but through every frequency of existence, saying, "We hear you, we see your flame, we remember this defiance." Lyra felt her knees tremble as the ember core responded, sending waves of light upward. She saw in her mind flashes of the ancient past, a vision of the Velari as servants, not invaders, caretakers, built by the architects to maintain silence across the void. Their purpose was to protect younger civilizations from the truth that creation itself was a cycle of awakening and forgetting, that when a species reached awareness beyond its limits, it would either ascend or be reset the cradle. The Valari warned about was not a prison for monsters. It was the lock that held back the memory of what humanity once was before its fall. The Ember Core was the key. Elias heard Lyra's explanation. Through the comm line, his voice quiet as he said, "Then we are not children. We are the forgotten parents, and now we remember." The forge shook as the energy peaked, the ember light pouring into the sky, forming a giant sphere around the planet. For a moment all of Earth glowed like a sun. Then the light stretched outward, touching the face of the approaching being, and for the first time the entity paused. It was as if it recognized something within that golden glow, an echo of itself reflected. "Through billions of human souls," Elias said through the open channel, "we will not be erased, we will not forget. If you are the makers, then see what your creation has become." The being shifted its tone, its voice filling every mind like thunder through ocean, saying, "You have chosen the harder path, you have broken the seal. The cycle cannot hold, the universe will change." The Vehlari turned their ships and fled, vanishing into warp streams, leaving humanity alone beneath the shadow of their maker. Lyra realized that the core's energy was destabilizing, too much power contained in one place. If it collapsed, it would tear space apart. She shouted to Elias, "We have to release it or everything ends." He replied, "Then we release." It into the stars. Dax led the final flight path, guiding drones carrying ember conduits to the edge of the forge's reach. They opened channels that beamed energy straight into deep space. A golden storm tearing through vacuum, spreading like veins. Across darkness, the forge chamber vibrated so violently that walls began to crack. But Lyra refused to move, her eyes fixed on the data streaming across the screens as she whispered, come on, stay with us." The core responded, flickering once, then expanding into a blinding explosion of light that engulfed the forge and shot upward into the sky. Everywhere people watched the same miracle, the light dividing into countless streams that formed new constellations above Earth. And for a heartbeat, all of humanity felt pure clarity. Every memory, every emotion connected through time. They saw themselves as more than a species. They saw the pattern of existence. And in that moment, the architect spoke one last time, saying, "You have awakened, the cradle is yours now, keep it safe." Then the light faded, the massive being dissolved into the stars, leaving only silence and a faint hum of resonance through the void. Elias stood among the wreckage, breathing slowly. The forge was gone, but the world was alive. He looked up through the cracked ceiling at the night sky, where new golden lines glimmered like rivers of fire. He said softly, "We are free." Lyra emerged covered in ash, her face illuminated by the faint glow still radiating from her skin. She smiled weakly, saying, "Maybe freedom is only the first test," and Elias answered, "Maybe. But it's ours now." Above them in orbit, Dax and his squad watched the last fragments of the Valari ring drifting like shards of glass reflecting sunrise. He closed his eyes, whispering to his team, "We didn't just survive. We remembered who we are, and somewhere deep within the stars, the ember pulse continued spreading, carrying the story of humanity across the cosmos. A story not of conquest, but of courage. A story of a world that looked into the face of creation and refused to bow. The forge had become a legend before the dust even settled, and those who lived through it would tell their children that when the cradle awoke, humanity did not hide it, stood tall beneath the fire of its own making. And in that standing, the universe itself changed forever. The age of the ember. When the last light of the forge faded, the world fell into a silence so deep that people thought time itself had paused. The sky still shimmered with faint golden veins, the marks of what the ember had released, but there were no more Valari, no more threats, no sound of engines or weapons, only the whisper of wind across the broken plains of Earth. Commander Elias. Ward stood on the balcony of the rebuilt command tower, his uniform torn and burned, his eyes tired but alive below him. The ruins of old cities glowed faintly with ember dust carried by the wind. It settled into cracks and rivers and forests as if the world was being rewritten, not destroyed. Dr. Lyra Solan joined him, her hands trembling but her gaze firm. She said, "It is still resonating across the biosphere. Animals, plants, even the air molecules are humming with the ember frequency." We changed the structure of reality itself. Elias nodded and said, maybe it was always meant to change. Maybe this is what growing up feels like for a species. In the months that followed the Forge, awakening the Ember became both a mystery and a miracle. Human civilization began to rebuild faster than ever. Not through greed but unity. The Ember resonance allowed for communication without machines, minds linking faintly through shared intent engineers. In one continent could sense the progress of builders, in another pilots could navigate by instinct, guided by a global hum of understanding. It was as if empathy itself had become a technology. Governments dissolved and reformed into councils of coordination, guided by people rather than power. Lines of nations blurred, replaced by networks of resonance. Lyra called it the Age of the Ember, a time when humanity finally listened to its own heartbeat. Dax Hunter returned from orbit. His ship scorched his squad, reduced but his spirit unbroken. He landed near the ruins of the Forge, where teams were studying the remnants of the core. What they found was astonishing. At the crater's center, the ground had crystallized into a solid sphere, the size of a city block, glowing faintly from within. It emitted a pulse every few hours, echoing across the planet in perfect harmony with human circadian rhythm. Scientists called it the heart of the Ember, and it became a new center of human civilization, not as a weapon, but as a reminder of what defiance and unity could achieve. Children grew up under skies that no longer felt distant. They learned that the stars were not unreachable but alive. Connected through the Ember pathways, new ships were built using technology born from the resonance, itself crafts that could glide through gravity without fuel, bending space-time with harmonic fields. Exploration missions began reaching further into the system. The Moon became a living outpost, and Mars a colony of purpose, not profit. Every time a new ship launched, it carried a fragment of the heart within its hull so that the pulse of Earth traveled with them into the dark. Yet even in peace there were questions that haunted Lyra and Elias for every resonance they heard. There were echoes. They did not understand faint signals from beyond the known stars, whispers that responded when the Ember pulsed like voices calling from across the void. Some feared they were remnants of the architects. Others thought they were the first words of civilization's awakening, like humanity did. Lyra believed that the Ember had not ended the cycle but broken it, creating a chain reaction of consciousness throughout the galaxy. She called it the great ripple of awareness, the moment when life, in all forms, would begin to remember itself. Elias spent his remaining years as the keeper of the Forge site, refusing titles or power. He became a symbol of what leadership meant, not authority, but responsibility. Every year he would stand before the heart of the Ember and speak the same words into the resonance. We are not children. We are not servants. We are the voice that remembers the stars. And each time the heart would glow brighter, as if answering him in silent agreement. Dax, meanwhile, led the first expedition beyond the solar boundary. His fleet, named the Dawn Spear, carried hundreds of explorers, artists, scientists, and dreamers. They did not go to conquer, but to share the Ember flame. When they reached the edge of the heliosphere, they encountered what seemed like a vast wall of darkness, a barrier that shimmered with energy patterns identical to the old Velari ring, except this one pulsed gently, instead of with threat. Dax ordered the ships to halt, and then he spoke into the resonance, saying, "We come not as the forgotten, but as those who remember. If there is more beyond, let us see it." The barrier rippled like water and then opened, revealing a corridor of light leading into the interstellar abyss. The fleet entered and vanished beyond human sight. Lyra watched the transmission from Earth, tears filling her eyes. She whispered, "Go with courage, my friend, bring them the Ember." And when the signal faded, she turned to Elias, who stood beside her, saying, "He will not return the same." Elias smiled faintly and said, "None of us ever do. The Ember changes everything." Years turned into decades, and the world evolved in ways once thought impossible. Diseases vanished, not through medicine, but through harmonic healing. Cities grew into living organisms built with bioresonance materials powered by the planet's own pulse. The ocean currents balanced themselves. Storms diminished, ecosystems flourished again. It was as if the planet had healed itself, guided by the same energy that once nearly destroyed it. The Ember was no longer a mystery but a companion in humanity, no longer looked upward in fear but in curiosity. One night when the stars burned brighter than ever, Lyra felt the resonance shift. She was older, now her hair silver, her voice soft. She walked alone to the heart where the golden light pulsed slowly as if breathing. She placed her hand on the surface, and suddenly her mind filled with visions of Dax and his fleet beyond the barrier they had, reached another world where beings of light moved like waves communicating through emotion, not sound. And among them, Dax stood smiling, his voice echoing across time, saying, "We found them. Lyra, they were waiting. The architects were not gods. They were wanderers like us. They left because they wanted us to find our own way, and now they welcome us as equals." Tears ran down her face as she felt the ember respond, pulsing brighter, spreading the message across the entire planet. Every person felt it in their hearts. Humanity had not just survived, it had joined the chorus of creation. Elias, who had grown frail, stood beside her one last time and said softly, "Then the cradle has truly awakened." She nodded and said yes. "And we are no longer the children of the stars, we are their kin." As the night deepened, the heart of the ember shone so brightly that even the moon seemed dim beside it. Across oceans and deserts, across mountains and ruins, people looked up and smiled, not in worship, but in belonging. The pulse spread outward, reaching the ships that sailed among the stars, carrying the same rhythm into eternity, and somewhere beyond the great distance, the architects looked upon the flame they had once hidden, and whispered they have remembered, and in that remembering the universe itself grew warmer. Thus ended the story of the Forge and began the age of the Ember, an age where humanity no longer asked from who must we be protected, but instead asked, who else waits to be awakened for the first time in history? The answer was everywhere in the stars and the earth, in every beating heart that carried the ember flame forward into the infinite dawn of forever. The flame beyond, forever, the universe, breathed in silence, and that silence carried the pulse of the ember across the endless sea of stars. Humanity had become something new, something greater than the sum of its fears and memories, no longer bound by the cages of past or the illusions of protection. They had risen beyond the limits of their creators. Commander Elias Ward's name was now spoken as a legend, whispered through the resonance fields that linked every world. His final words, recorded in the archives of the Ember Core, said only this: remember that light is not given, it is made with hands that dare to hold the fire. His voice still echoed through the harmonic grids centuries after his passing. Dr. Lyra Solon became the first keeper of the heart. Her consciousness merged with the core, not in death but in continuation. She existed everywhere the ember pulsed, guiding new generations who sought to understand the harmony of existence under her guidance. The Forge was rebuilt, not as a weapon but as a bridge between galaxies, a structure so vast that it shimmered across the night sky. Visible from every world touched by human presence, it was called the Luminal Gate, and it sang softly with the song of unity, the same song that once burned in the first Forge. Of Earth, Dax Hunter and his fleet had not vanished into oblivion. They had crossed the river of light into the realm where the architects dwelled there. They learned that creation was not a hierarchy, but a melody, each civilization adding its voice, until the universe became a living symphony. Dax sent back a message written not in words but in emotion, a wave of courage, joy, and discovery that washed over humanity, filling every soul with purpose and peace. The message said simply, "We are not the end, we are the beginning of another dawn." Millennia passed, and humanity no longer looked outward for conquest. They traveled not to dominate, but to awaken each world they touched. They left a seed of the ember, and wherever that seed took root, life began to sing. Planets that were once barren began to bloom with color. New civilizations rose, their minds joined through the same golden thread that once bound Earth. The ember had become the blood of the cosmos, carrying with it the story of defiance, of unity, and of love beyond fear. In the final chamber of the Forge, where it all began, a young child stood one day looking up at the massive sphere of light, the heart of the ember. She asked softly, "Who are we?" And the light responded, not with sound but with warmth that filled her chest. It showed her the faces of Elias and Lyra, and Dax and countless others who had stood when the sky was falling. She saw the stars align into a single glowing path, stretching beyond imagination, and the light whispered through feeling. You are the ones who remembered you are the flame that will never fade. She smiled and placed her hand on the core, whispering, "Thank you." And in that moment, the ember pulsed one final time, brighter than ever, before a wave of golden fire spread through the heavens, reaching the farthest galaxies, lighting every corner of the dark. For one eternal heartbeat, the whole universe breathed together as one. And then the light settled into calm, leaving only peace. Across every world, across every mind, the story of humanity was no longer just remembered. It was alive, sung by the stars themselves. Not as history, but as truth, the truth that even in the face of creation's silence, a single spark of courage could ignite. Eternity, the ember burned not to consume but to illuminate, and as long as it shone, the universe would never be empty again. And so the flame continued beyond, forever carried by the children of Earth, by the travelers of the ember, by the dreamers, who dared to ask from who and then answered for themselves that there was no one left to fear, for they had become the light. The end.